As a group, we decided to explore the topic of Royal European Gardens. Europe was a massive empire with an extensive history of monarchies throughout the centuries. In reflecting on each monarch, each garden showed the elite trends of that time along with the personal style of each ruling power. We will be sharing 5 gardens that we considered very influential in European history. Each garden has its uniqueness that impacted the culture of European gardens as a whole. We will be discussing Het Loo Garden, Schönbrunn Palace Garden, the Hampton Court Palace Gardens, the Palace of Versailles Gardens, and Retiro Park, all of which have illustrated the grandeur of the European royalty and influenced European gardens in some way.
Het Loo is a garden in the Netherlands that was created and designed under the hand of King William III and Princess Mary in 1686. Its initial intent was for hunting. Looking at the garden itself, it was built in the style of Baroque, a formal, and in this specific case, very high maintenance, landscape design influenced by the Dutch and French gardening styles. A hallmark of Baroque-style gardens is the use of espalier forms of plants where a plant is grown against the wall so that the plant itself grows flat. In Het Loo, as you can see, its fruit trees are grown in that style. The garden features an array of apple, pear, peach, apricot, nectarine, cherry, and plum trees along the south wall. One of its main attractions is the water features present in this garden. In class, we discussed that it's very popular to use water as a focal point because of our natural affinity for it and how it exudes a sense of peace over the garden. Het Loo has not only one, but 2 main fountains. In the upper garden, also known as the King's Garden, there's a fountain that spouts water up to 30 meters high, and in the lower garden, the Queen's Garden, there's a fountain that contains a sculpture of Venus and 4 swans. Overall, the garden itself is heavily influenced by its surrounding region of high level of groundwater and presence of natural springs.
Next, we have the Hampton Court Palace. The Hampton Court Palace was originally opened in 1514 along the Thames River in London. It wasn't until the reign of Queen Mary II in 1689 that the gardens were opened in the palace. Queen Mary had a passion of collecting rare plants, which she planted in King Henry's pond garden and the orangery, which she had built. Before the opening of the gardens, there was a privy, or private, garden that was created when King Henry VII lived in the palace. This garden was created as a quiet place exclusively for monarch use. The Hampton Court Palace has 60 acres of formal gardens and 750 acres of parkland that have been cultivated since the medieval period. Since being built, the land has been rebuilt and remodeled over and over. In the 1700s, King William III commissioned George London and the Henry Wise to create the Great Maze. This maze is a third of an acre and is the United Kingdom's oldest surviving hedge. The Great Maze is a trapezoid shape and was planted with hornbeam hedge and then at a later time replanted with yew.
The Palace of Versailles was created by Louis XIV during the 17th century. Louis XIV wanted to separate royalty from the commoners in order to centralize power, so instead of aristocrats living in Paris, Versailles was constructed just outside of the city to achieve this separation. In 1661, construction on the Palace of Versailles began. However, this wasn't going to be just a palace. Louis XIV appointed André Le Notre to take charge of the creation of the Gardens of Versailles. The creation of the garden took around 40 years to complete. The gardens are designed to portray a sense of order. They are manicured very carefully with very defined edges and geometrical shapes throughout. However, inside of the well-manicured edges are serpentine patterned shrubbery that adds a sense of sophistication to the garden. This fits Louis XIV's intentions for the space quite well. As a king, he valued order and power, and he wanted to centralize it, but he also wanted to show his sophistication, hence the separation from commoners. Louis XIV is regarded as one of the most powerful kings of all time, and all those who set foot on the Gardens of Versailles can understand why through the narrative that the garden tells.
Retiro Park is located in the heart of Madrid, Spain. It is comprised of 350 acres of land planned out in the 1550s by Gaspar de Gunmes, the court duke and chief minister to King Philip IV. He gave King Philip IV the land for the court's recreational use. The king then added a palace and a theater, where the famous comedies of the most prolific of Spanish playwrights were produced. Both the palace and the theater burned in 1734 and were not restored until King Ferdinand V ordered the palace rebuilt, but again it was razed in the Peninsular War. A remnant of the palace now serves as a war museum for the public. Later on, during Queen Isabella II's reign, the park had a very prosperous period. The landscapers planted numerous shade and fruit trees and landscaped previously unplanted sections. Currently, the park contains different attractions for human engagement, including the Zoological Gardens, the Crystal Palace, which is a glass building used for art exhibitions, which was built in 1887 and initially was used to house exotic plants and is now a home for temporary exhibitions. One of the main attractions of the park is the central artificial lake near the northern entrance, called Retiro Pond, where people can sit and enjoy the scenery or rent a boat to take out on the lake and float around. Finally, the famous Rose Gardens of Retiro are world-renowned for their beauty. Inside, you can find the Fountain of the Falling Angel, built in 1922, which shows Lucifer falling from heaven. This is the only known public monument of the devil and is surrounded by more than 4,000 roses throughout the gardens. Over time, El Retiro Park gradually became the green heart of the city and has now become a widely visited tourist location as well.
Schönbrunn Palace is another European royal garden which was opened to the public in 1779. This breathtaking garden has recreational, cultural, and historical value to the people. In 1996, Schönbrunn Palace Garden was also placed on the list of World Heritage Sites. The park's first name was Katterberg and was owned by Emperor Maximilian II, the Roman-German emperor, who laid out pleasure gardens and a game preserve to pursue his passion of hunting and collecting. This garden held exotic birds such as peacocks and turkeys, which was a feature of gardens at the time. Through a hunting excursion, the garden was given the name Schönbrunn Palace, after Matthias found the fair spring. The garden was passed through many generations and eventually acquired a corn mill and a variety of vineyards. After being besieged by Ottoman forces in 1683, the palace and park at Schönbrunn were devastated. But during the reign of Maria Theresa, the garden was reconstructed into a beautiful place, with external beauty as well as internal beauty of the palace. Statues of mythological figures were placed in the garden, during this time being a prominent feature found in gardens. Today, there is a hothouse placed in the garden which models and expands hothouses established by Franz Stephen in 1753, which housed the imperial family's extensive botanical collections. In the 19th century, the garden has been maintained in the English style to keep up with horticultural trends today.
While each of these gardens were constructed in different eras and countries, the similarities they share are unmistakable. The monarchs that constructed each of these gardens sought to show their sophistication through gardens that required delicate and constant care. These gardens have a lasting effect on people that visit them, as the sophistication and power that European monarchs possessed still resonates throughout them.